You're listening to Our Introverted Lives, a podcast not only for introverts, but for all personality types. Your personality has an impact on your daily life, whether it be physically, emotionally, spiritually, or mentally. Join us weekly as we learn more about each other and ourselves. Hey there, everybody. Thank you for listening to Our Introverted Lives. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about mental health. But first, before we dive in, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. If you don't celebrate Christmas, Happy Holidays. Recently, I've been more active in other Facebook groups, asking you guys what you guys like or dislike about the podcast, what can I improve on. And the three most common answers I got were, number one, I need to have longer episodes. Number two, you guys want to hear more about my own experiences than just facts. And number three, I need to have more guests on the show. I'm going to improve on these three things going forward. If you guys think of anything else that I can improve on, anything that you guys like or dislike about the podcast, please let me know. I am open to constructive criticism. So now that we got that part out of the way, let's dive into today's subject. So, mental health. Overall studies show that introverts are more vulnerable than extroverts to depression and decreased mental well-being. Now, I know what you're thinking. Introverts are more susceptible to mental health issues because they are more isolated, right? But that's not the only reason. Neurological studies have shown that brain activity is much more active in introverts than extroverts. Now, I know what you're thinking. How come is it that an introvert, somebody who's less engaged socially, how come is it that they have the most brain activity? And the answer is pretty simple if you think about it, because an introvert is more stuck in their own mind than an extrovert. We sweat the small stuff. A good personal example that I have for you guys is if I run into somebody that I haven't seen in months at the store and I'm making small talk with them and I say something that I shouldn't have, or I screw up a word, or I act the way that I shouldn't have, it will keep me up that night. I will go to bed reflecting on what I did wrong. Whereas an extrovert, they don't really sweat that kind of stuff. If they screw up a word in conversation or act a way that they shouldn't have, it doesn't bother them. At the end of the day, they'll sleep like a baby. Now let's talk about my own personal mental health journey. I think that a lot of other people can relate. So when I was in JK, SK first grade, I thought that there was something wrong with me because I didn't like to be as socially engaged with my friends and my other classmates, so that attracted a lot of bullying. It made my elementary school years literally a living hell. I didn't suffer a lot of physical abuse, most of it was mental. So they would ignore me when I would try talking to them, or they would accidentally throw stuff at me and laugh, or try to humiliate me. My main bully, I'm not going to mention any names obviously, but he came up to me many years later in the 8th grade and he told me, you know what, Justin, I'm actually sorry for the way I treated you during your elementary school years. I had no right to do that. I apologize. So I took his apology. By that time, I had realized that his apology was very sincere. He was a changed person. So I forgave him and just moved on with my life. In 2005, my dad passed away from colon cancer. He was barely 36 when he died. He had just turned 36 a few months prior to his death. My sister, she was barely 3 when he died. They shared the same birthday. Me, I was 7.5 when he died. And, growing up without a dad, not only do you lose a role model and a parent, but you also miss out on a lot of life experiences as well, such as going hunting, fishing, camping, how to change a tire, how to ride a bike, how to tie a knot. Um, I didn't have anybody to teach me those things, so I had to teach myself. And, that's affected my life big time because I was always behind the other kids when it came to construction work and um, those types of experiences because I didn't have anybody to show me growing up, so I learned those things at a later time in life. I've also had a lot of loss in my life other than my dad. Like, I lost my grandma a few years after my dad died. Then a few years after that, I lost my grandpa. And then my other grandpa a few years later. And so I only have one grandparent left, and that's my dad's mom. She's 90 years old now. But there's also been some good times, like meeting my wife a few years after my grandmother died. She's been my rock. We've been together for 9 years now, married for 3.5. We also have a beautiful daughter named Hadley May. She's 10 months old now. So you have to go through life knowing that there's going to be hard times, but the good will outweigh the bad. Another big thing that can have an impact on your mental health is the state of your finances. Especially nowadays during the COVID pandemic, the prices for everything just keep on skyrocketing and our wages are not adjusting accordingly. And a lot of families nowadays, they have to decide which bills are more important to pay than others, and that could be a very scary thing, let me tell you. Everybody has been affected by this pandemic one way or another, whether it's been emotionally, financially, physically, spiritually, and any way that you can think of. People have been affected by this pandemic. So if anybody's going through a hard time right now and they want to talk about it, my door is always open. So feel free to send me a message anytime. And I love to talk to you. Another big way that you can improve the state of your mental health is by having somebody close to you, whether that's a friend or a family member or a spouse. You're going to need somebody there along the way when life throws you shambles, and it will for sure. If your mental health gets really bad and you feel like you have nobody to talk to in your life, there are always helplines for you out there that you can call toll free to get the help that you need through those hard times. This episode actually begins a new season for us, season 2. So in this season, I want to focus on broader subjects that I feel like everybody can relate to, not just introverts or extroverts. In a previous season, we've already introduced what an introvert and an extrovert are. So now we're moving on. You guys might also notice that I do have a little bit of a stutter during some podcast episodes. I've had that my whole life. When I was a kid, it was a lot worse. I actually needed a speech therapist because I had a really hard time pronouncing a lot of syllables. So I do apologize in advance if I do stutter, but I'll try to keep it to a bare minimum. Thank you everybody for listening to this episode. If you're listening on YouTube, please click the like button underneath this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Anchor, please follow this podcast. Thank you everybody. And again, happy holidays. Cheers.